My house has always smelled of coffee and old books. It had been that way long before Noah brought his newfound wife Abigail under the roof that had sheltered 3 generations of Hamptrees. I, Oliver Hamptree, have lived in Clear Lake all my life. 68 years of habit and consistency. Clear Lake is a town that doesn't change. It's like an old photograph, slightly faded around the edges, but still holding the same vistas. A lake with clear water, Pearson's hardware store on the corner of the main street, the red brick post office building, and the obligatory Blueberry Festival every summer. I worked as a long-distance bus driver for 33 years, traveling the interstate highways and coming home with stories of people and towns. My Rosemary loved those stories. She collected them like other women collect porcelain figurines or silver spoons. When she passed away 5 years ago, taking with her a heart arrhythmia and a smile that made the wrinkles around her eyes look like sunbeams, I stopped telling stories. There was no one to listen to them now. This happened even before Noah and Abigail moved in with little Toby. My son had always been stubborn and arrogant, with that special self-assurance of a man who is sure he deserves more than he has. Telecommunications equipment service engineer is a prestigious job, but not enough to buy a house in a nice neighborhood, especially if your wife quit her job as an insurance analyst because the office environment is toxic. Actually, I think Abigail just didn't get along with her boss. "Dad, it's only temporary," Noah said then, dragging boxes into my house. "A year tops until we get back on our feet." A year stretched into 4, and then Toby was born. Toby came into this world prematurely, a tiny creature with skin as translucent as rice paper. Noah looked lost as he stood at the incubator in the prematurity ward, and I recognized his gaze as my own, the same one I'd had when he'd been born, when I'd first realized the weight of fatherhood. "He's going to be okay," I said then, though I wasn't sure. Toby did survive, but at age 2, he was diagnosed with cerebral palsy. A mild form, the doctor said, but enough to change his whole life, and ours. That's when I noticed the first signs. The way Abigail would pull away when it was time for physical therapy exercises. How Noah started staying late at work and going away on business trips more often than necessary. How they both started talking about Toby in the third person, even when he was sitting next to him, as if his speech impediment meant he didn't understand what adults were saying, and he understood a lot. At 4, Toby had an inquisitive mind and eyes that watched everything with wary interest. His body could be naughty, with legs that didn't always go where he wanted them to go, and hands that sometimes shook so badly he couldn't hold a spoon. But behind it all was a sharp mind. "Grandpa," he would say in his slow, diligent voice as I helped him get dressed in the morning, "tell me about the bus." And I told him about the big buses I drove, about the passengers and the cities and the way the road went beyond the horizon. He listened as Rosemary had once listened, with full attention, as if my words were building a bridge between us. In those moments, I felt that Toby was more my grandson than their son. The thought made me feel guilty, but it grew weaker every time I noticed Abigail sighing at having to help Toby in the bathroom, or Noah refusing to take him to another doctor's appointment. "I have work, Dad," he said, not looking me in the eye. "You're retired, you have plenty of time." I never responded that my plenty of time was filled with taking care of his child while he made money that somehow never went to improving Toby's life. The house we all lived in was still built by my father. 2 stories with a wide veranda and a view of the lake in the distance. When Rosemary was alive, we grew roses along the driveway and had visitors on Sundays. Now the rose bushes are overgrown, and the only guests were Toby's physical therapist twice a week, and the rare old friends who hadn't yet left for nursing homes or children in other cities. I kept my name on the deed to the house, even when Noah hinted that it was time to reissue it. "You don't change habits at my age," I said, and Noah reluctantly backed off. Maybe he thought time was on his side, and sooner or later I'd agree, or just leave after Rosemary. But I wasn't going anywhere. I woke up every morning, made breakfast for Toby, helped him get dressed, and took him to his speech or physical therapy sessions. I learned how to massage his legs to reduce spasticity and made up games to help him develop coordination. "Don't spoil him," Abigail said, catching us playing a game of buttons I'd invented to help Toby practice his fine motor skills. "He needs to get used to the real world." What did she know about the real world? Or about how hard it is for Toby in this world where the stairs are too high, The doors are too heavy, and people talk too fast. Lately, the tension in the house had become palpable, like another tenant taking a seat at the table and breathing down our necks. Noah and Abigail barely spoke to me except for business. We're leaving. There's food in the fridge. Toby needs new orthopedic shoes. Will you make him a doctor's appointment? I began to notice other signs. The way they whispered in the kitchen, falling silent when I walked in. The way Abigail started browsing cruise websites, leaving open tabs on her laptop. How they both looked at Toby with an expression I couldn't name other than tiredness. One night after I'd put Toby to bed, I overheard their conversation as I walked down the stairs. I can't go on like this, Noah. Abigail's voice was muffled but distinct. It's like we're trapped. Other couples our age are traveling, making friends, living. But what about us? Stuck with a kid who'll never be normal, and your father who looks at us like we're the last losers. I froze in the middle of the stairs, gripping the banister tightly. Do you think I like this life? Noah replied. But what can I do? Toby is our son, and his father, well, it's his house after all. There was a pause, and I could almost see Abigail squinting, considering something. What if we took a break? She finally said. Your father does most of the work with Toby as it is. He can handle a few weeks without us. And we could, I don't know, go somewhere. Reboot. There was silence, and I could practically hear the gears turning in my son's head. Do you think he'll go for it? Noah asked after a pause. Who's going to ask him? There was that steely note in Abigail's voice that always slipped in when she spoke of something she thought she was entitled to. We're adults, Noah. We deserve a vacation. I didn't listen any further. Quietly, I climbed back up the stairs and went into Toby's room. In the moonlight streaming through the blinds, his face looked peaceful, without the tension that came when he tried to control his movements. I looked at his reddish hair, at the freckles scattered across his nose just like Rosemary's, and felt something cold and hard growing inside. They wanted to run away from their responsibilities, from their own child, and I should have just accepted it, like I'd accepted all their decisions over the last few years. But this time, something in me resisted. Maybe it was Rosemary's voice in my head, reminding me that sometimes you have to fight for what's right. Or maybe it was the look in Toby's eyes as he looked at me with complete trust, unaware that his parents thought of him as a burden. That night, lying in my old double bed, where the right side had been left empty for 5 years now, I began to reflect. The house was titled in my name. It was my trump card, my insurance policy, which I had never thought of using against my own son. But if they could so easily abdicate their responsibilities to Toby, then maybe it was time to show them that every choice had consequences. I fell asleep with that thought, and it grew inside me like a seed tossed into fertile soil. They made their move on Sunday. I had just returned with Toby from the lake where we fed the ducks. It was one of our little rituals to walk to the water with a bag of stale bread that I had set aside specifically for that purpose. Toby loved watching the birds snatch bits out of the water, their greedy beaks and fluffy feathers. His laughter, rare and precious, rang out over the water. I was helping him take off his jacket and boots in the hallway when I heard voices from the kitchen. Noah and Abigail were rarely home on weekends, preferring to spend time with friends or at the mall in the next town over. Toby, go watch cartoons while I talk to Dad and Mom, I said, turning on the TV in the living room. He nodded, looking intently at the screen where his favorite animal program was starting. I noticed his right hand twitch involuntarily, a sign of arousal he couldn't always control. In the kitchen, Noah and Abigail sat at the table with expressions I recognized immediately. The way people look when they're about to break news they like, but you might not like. Abigail had a glossy brochure in her lap, and I caught a glimpse of the word cruise in large print. Dad, it's good to have you back, Noah began, rubbing his hands together, a gesture he'd learned from me, though he'd never admit it. Abigail and I wanted to talk to you about something. I sat down across from them, feeling heavy in my chest. I already knew what they were going to say, but I was going to give them a chance to say it out loud. We decided we needed a vacation. Abigail smiled, that special smile that never reached her eyes. The last few years had been stressful, and we thought it was time to do something for ourselves. A cruise? I asked, nodding at the brochure. 21 days in the Caribbean, Noah confirmed with the enthusiasm he usually reserved for talking about his hobbies, not his son. Dash Miami, the Bahamas, Jamaica, the Caymans, all paid for already. I looked at them, noting that none of them had mentioned Toby. It was as if he didn't exist, or it was a minor detail that could be discussed later. What about Toby? I asked, even though the answer was obvious. Abigail and Noah exchanged glances, as if deciding which one of them would take over that part of the conversation. We were hoping you could watch him while we were gone, Abigail said finally. You know how attached he is to you, and you know his regimen better than anyone. She said it as if she were complimenting me, not shifting her parenting responsibilities to me for 3 weeks. And when are you planning to leave? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Next Saturday, Noah answered. The plane leaves early in the morning. A week. They had a 3-week trip planned, and they were only giving me a week's notice. And you didn't think to discuss it with me before? I couldn't hide my surprise. 3 weeks is a long time. Noah pressed his lips together, and I saw a reflection of his mother in that gesture. Rosemary did the same thing when she was annoyed, but she didn't want to show it. Dad, we know you're going to go along with this. You're with Toby all the time. What difference does it make if we're home or not? This is it. A truth they both knew but had never expressed so bluntly before. I did most of the parenting while they lived their lives under my roof. Did you ask Toby what he thought? I inquired, knowing the answer would be no. Abigail brushed it off. Oliver, he's a child, and he has, his condition. He won't understand. I felt anger rising inside, but I suppressed it. Toby understood a lot more than they realized. He noticed his mother's coldness, his father's absence, the way they interacted with him as if he were an unintelligent child, rather than a smart boy trapped in a naughty body. I think you should tell him, I said firmly, and you should do it now. They reluctantly followed me into the living room, where Toby was still watching TV, his eyes fixed on the screen. Toby, I called out, and he looked up. Mom and Dad have something to tell you. Noah coughed, suddenly as awkward as a teenager. Hey, buddy, he started in that special tone he only used with Toby, too loud and slow. Mom and I are going on a trip soon, on a big ship, by sea. You'll have to stay with Grandpa while we're gone. Toby blinked, shifting his gaze from his father to his mother. Am I going too? He asked, and my heart squeezed at the hope in his voice. No, honey, Abigail said, not looking him in the eye. This is for adults only, but we'll bring you some souvenirs. I saw the light go out of Toby's eyes, the way his shoulders slumped. He understood everything, not just that he wasn't being taken on the trip. He realized that his parents wanted a break from him. For how long? He asked me, not them, and that was telling too. For 21 days, I answered honestly. 3 weeks. He nodded as if accepting the sentence and turned back to the TV, but I noticed that he wasn't really looking at the screen anymore. His gaze had become absent, like it used to be when he was trying not to show he was upset. Noah patted him on the shoulder, a gesture that should have been reassuring but looked awkward and formal. You're going to be a good boy with Grandpa, aren't you? He said. Time would fly by quickly. Toby didn't answer, and Noah, casting me a helpless look, left the room. Abigail followed him without a word. I stayed with my grandson, watching a lone tear roll down his cheek, which he hastily brushed away, thinking I couldn't see. That evening, after I put Toby to bed, I found Noah and Abigail packing. They were fidgeting in their room, filled with anticipation, like children before Christmas morning. Isn't it a little early to pack? I asked, standing in the doorway. Abigail looked up from the suitcase where she'd neatly folded the summer dresses. It's better to do everything in advance so I don't forget anything, she said. Besides, I have a few meetings at work before I leave. I chuckled. Abigail worked part-time at a friend's clothing store, and her meetings usually meant long lunches with her friends. I made a list of everything that needed to be done with Toby. Noah handed me a slip of paper with a few items hastily written on it. Medications, doctor's appointments, the name of the clinic. Nothing I didn't know, just in case. In case I forgot how to take care of the grandchild I take care of every day. I couldn't help myself. Noah pressed his lips together. Dad, don't start, okay? We just want to make sure everything's going to be okay. Everything will be fine, I said, folding up the piece of paper and putting it in my pocket. Shucky, don't worry about it. I turned to leave but stopped in the doorway. By the way, will you leave money for his needs? Medication, special food, cab to the doctors? There was an awkward pause. Noah and Abigail exchanged glances. Dad, you know we spent a lot on this cruise, Noah began. And on new clothes for the trip, I added, nodding at the pile of purchases in the corner of the room, labeled with expensive brands. Abigail pressed her lips together. Oliver, we'll keep our cards. If you need anything, you can use them. But I'm sure you'll manage. You always do. I smiled, not the warm smile I'd saved for Toby, but a different one that didn't involve my eyes. Of course I can handle it. Good night. The next few days passed in a flurry of preparations. Theirs, not mine. Abigail was buying sunscreen and hats. Noah was checking tickets and passports. They talked about the trip incessantly, not noticing the way Toby cringed every time the subject came up. I did notice, and with each passing day, my resolve grew stronger. Thursday night, when Toby was already asleep and Noah and Abigail had left for a farewell dinner with friends, I sat down at the computer. In the search box, I typed, "Sell house fast." The results were promising. Agencies offering urgent buyouts, advice on selling real estate fast. I wrote out a few phone numbers. Then I checked the deeds to the house, stored in Rosemary's old jewelry box. Everything was in order. I owned the house outright, unencumbered. I could dispose of it as I saw fit. It wasn't a spontaneous decision. It had been brewing inside me since the night I'd overheard them talking in the kitchen. But now, looking at the nonchalance with which they were going to abandon their child for 3 weeks, I was certain of my choice. If Noah and Abigail thought they could just get away with it without consequences, they were wrong. I was going to teach them a lesson they wouldn't forget. On Friday, the day before they left, I called the real estate agency and made an appointment with an agent. A woman named Lydia agreed to come over on Monday, when Noah and Abigail would be well out to sea. "Dash Mr. Hamtree," she said over the phone. "For a quick sale, we can offer a little below market value, but you'll get the money almost immediately. Does that suit you?" "More than satisfactory," I answered. "I don't want the maximum price. I need speed." The evening before they left, we sat down to dinner, the last dinner the four of us would have before their journey. Toby was quiet, hardly eating, even though I had made his favorite macaroni and cheese. "Toby, honey, eat," Abigail said with a note of annoyance. "Don't be naughty." He put his fork to his mouth obediently, but I could see that he was struggling with each sip. "Hey, buddy," Noah tried to cheer him up. "You know what I'm going to get you? A real pirate hat, like Captain Jack's." Toby smiled weakly, but I could see that the smile was for them, not from the heart. He was playing the part of a good boy who isn't upset about his parents' departure. "Dad, are you sure you can handle it?" Noah asked, turning to me. "Maybe we should ask neighbor Pearl to come over and help with him sometimes." "No need," I said. "Toby and I can do just fine on our own." Later, as I put Toby to bed, I noticed him clutching his stuffed rabbit, Rosemary's second birthday present to him. "They're coming back, aren't they, Grandpa?" he asked quietly, his eyes full of a worry that a 4-year-old shouldn't have. Of course they will," I answered, taking a seat on the edge of his bed. "But you know what? While they're gone, you and I can do whatever we want. How about that?" His eyes brightened a little. "Ice cream for breakfast?" I laughed. "Maybe not every day, but sometimes why not? And we can go to the lake every day if you want." He nodded, falling asleep. I leaned over and kissed his forehead, breathing in the baby smell of shampoo and clean linens. "Sleep well, baby," I whispered. "Grandpa will always be there for you." As I left the room, I noticed Abigail standing in the hallway. She looked a little embarrassed, like she'd been caught eavesdropping. "He's afraid we won't come back," she said quietly. "That's stupid." I looked at her, noticing the cold glint in her eyes. "It's not stupid for a child to be abandoned for 3 weeks," I said. "We're not abandoning him," she countered. "He's staying with you." "Yes," I nodded, "with me." I couldn't sleep that night, lying in the dark, going over my plan in my head. Part of me doubted it was a drastic step that would change our lives forever. But then I remembered Toby's face when he'd asked if his parents were coming back, and his quiet resignation before they left. I thought of how easily Noah and Abigail had decided to leave him, how they'd spoken of him in the third person, as if he were an annoying nuisance. And then the doubts receded, replaced by cold determination. I was protecting my grandson in a way his parents couldn't. And if that required selling the house I'd lived in all my life, then so be it. Saturday morning came all too quickly. The cab was due at 5 in the morning to take them to the airport. I got up at 4 to make them coffee, a final gesture of hospitality. Dawn had not yet touched the horizon when the cab pulled up. 6 o'clock in the morning, February darkness enveloped the house in a thick blanket. I stood on the veranda, holding Toby's hand. He had insisted on getting up to say goodbye to his parents, though his eyes were sleep-deprived. A small figure in dinosaur pajamas and the overcoat I'd thrown over his shoulders before heading out into the cold air. Noah and Abigail fussed with their suitcases, giving directions to the cabbie, checking passports, checking the time on their phones. Their excitement was almost palpable, the joy of escape, the anticipation of freedom. Finally, after making sure all their luggage was loaded, Noah turned to us. "Well, Dad, we're off. We'll make calls on Viber. There is Wi-Fi on the ship. Have a safe trip," I said neutrally. "Abigail, why don't you at least give your son a hug before we're 3 weeks apart?" My question sounded sharper than I intended. Abigail, who was already opening the cab door, reluctantly returned. She leaned toward Toby, wrapping one arm around him. The hug came out crumpled, awkward, as if she was afraid of getting her new coat dirty. "Behave yourself," she said in a duty phrase, as if she were leaving him with a babysitter for the evening, not 21 days. Toby nodded, his eyes serious beyond his years. "When will you be back?" he asked, clinging to his mother's sleeve. 3 weeks, baby," Noah answered for her, patting his son on the head. "It'll go by so fast you won't even notice." Toby didn't let go of his mom's hand, and I saw the impatience flicker across Abigail's face. She released herself gently, giving Noah a look that said, "Do something." "Toby, we have to go." Noah's voice became sterner. "We're going to miss the plane." "But you promised to bring me a pirate hat," Toby muttered, his lower lip quivering. "I want to come with you." Abigail rolled her eyes, not hiding her irritation. "Noah, seriously, we don't have time for this." The cabbie honked, pointing to his watch. Noah squatted down in front of his son, and for a moment I thought he'd finally show some parental sensitivity. But instead he spoke up. "Toby, don't make us late. Be a big boy." Toby, seeing that his pleas were useless, suddenly burst into tears, loudly, inconsolably, as only little children can do. He clutched at his father's jacket, unwilling to let go. Noah, clearly embarrassed by the scene, tried to unhook his fingers, but Toby held on tight, his cries growing louder. Abigail, already in the cab, opened the window. "God, Noah, stop it!" Her voice sounded irritated. "We're sick of him. Bye." I froze at those words. They sounded like she wasn't talking about her baby, but about an annoying thing. Toby seemed to hear them too. His crying was cut short. He froze, looking at his mother with wide-open eyes. Noah, seeing that Toby was distracted for a moment, took advantage of the moment and quickly pulled away, almost running towards the cab. "Dad, we'll call," he shouted, jumping into the back seat. The car started, taking them into the pre-dawn darkness. The last thing I saw was Abigail's profile, already digging into her phone, as if everything that had happened had been left behind, along with the house, my son, and me. Toby stood there, stunned, staring after the headlights. Then he turned to me, his face contorted with another wave of tears. "They don't want me," he said with such piercing clarity that my heart splintered. I scooped him up into my arms, ignoring the protest in my lower back. "That's not true, baby. They were just in a hurry." Mommy didn't think about what she was saying. My words sounded hollow, and Toby, even at his 4 years old, knew it. He snuggled his face into my shoulder and cried until his little body collapsed from exhaustion. I carried him into the house, straight to his bed, and sat beside him until he fell asleep again, his eyelashes still wet with tears. In the morning light timidly filtering through the curtains, I scrutinized his face. Rosemary's features in the curve of his eyebrows, Noah's nose in miniature, the freckles that belonged to him alone. "No one will ever hurt you again," I whispered, stroking his hair. I promise. And in that moment, the decision that had been brewing inside me for the past few days finally took hold. Not just to sell the house, create a new life for Toby and me. A life where there would be no room for those who could so easily say, we're tired of him. That day I let Toby sleep as long as he needed to. When he finally woke up around noon, I greeted him with a smile and pancakes sprinkled with chocolate chips, his favorite treat that Abigail had always forbidden as too sweet. We're on vacation, buddy, I said as he looked at his plate in surprise. We can do whatever we want. He ate slowly, still depressed by the morning goodbye. But by the end of the breakfast, there was a glimmer of interest in his eyes. What are we going to do, Grandpa? What would you like to do? I asked, pushing the coffee cup aside. Can we go to the lake? He asked timidly, as if he expected a refusal. Sure, and we can stop by that big toy store downtown. How about that? His eyes widened. Can we really do that? Really, I nodded. And then maybe a movie? There's that robot cartoon you wanted to see. Gradually, step by step, I saw the bitterness of my parents' departure recede, replaced by childlike curiosity and joy at the promise of adventure. That afternoon, we visited the lake where we fed the ducks, went to the toy store where I bought him the construction set he'd long wanted, and ended the day at the movie theater with popcorn and a Coke, another forbidden pleasure in Abigail's regimen. In the evening, as I put him to bed, I noticed that his smile had become freer and his movements less stilted. It was as if the absence of his mother's constant critical gaze and his father's detached indifference had freed him from invisible shackles. The next morning after breakfast, I sat Toby in front of the television with his favorite animal program. Grandpa has to do some work in the study, I explained. Will you be okay on your own? Yes, he nodded, already engrossed in the dolphin program. In the office, I pulled out a folder with the deeds to the house and started looking through them. Everything was in order. The house belonged to me undivided. No encumbrances. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I'd written out of the internet a couple days ago. Shortly, real estate agency. New Horizons. My name is Lydia. How can I help you? I heard a pleasant female voice. I explained my situation, leaving out personal details. I need to sell the house as soon as possible. The price is not as important as the speed of the transaction. I understand, Mr. Hamtree. Can I come back tomorrow to appraise the property? Yes, I'll be waiting. After the call, I felt a strange lightness. The wheel had turned, and there was no turning back. Lydia arrived the next day as promised. She was an energetic woman in her 40s, with a short haircut and a keen eye that assessed every corner of the house. It's a great location, she said, looking out at the view from the living room. And the lot is quite large. Why did you decide to sell? I looked at Toby, who was sitting on the couch with a new construction project. Family reasons, I answered. We need something more appropriate. She followed my gaze and nodded, noting Toby's cane leaning against the couch and his special orthopedic chair. I see. Well, let's go over the details. We sat down at the kitchen table, and Lydia pulled out a file folder. Given the market and your desire for a quick sale, I would suggest setting the price slightly below market, she said, and I nodded in agreement. It will attract more buyers and allow us to finalize the deal faster. I think we can find a buyer within 2 or 3 weeks. 2 or 3 weeks? I questioned. Couldn't we do it faster? Lydia frowned. Mr. Hamtree, even in a rush sale, there are certain procedures. I understand, I interrupted. But if there's a buyer who's willing to pay at once, say in cash? She looked at me carefully, as if she were seeing me for the first time. I have a few clients who are looking for properties like yours and are ready for a quick transaction, but that means an even bigger discount off the market price. I'm fine with that, I replied firmly. The sooner the better. Over the next few days, Toby and I established a new routine. In the morning, I would help him with the exercises the physical therapist recommended. Then we would have breakfast and go for a walk. To the park, to the lake, to the museum. In the afternoon, while Toby rested, I dealt with the sale of the house. Lydia proved to be an effective agent. Just 3 days after our meeting, she brought in the first potential buyers, a middle-aged couple who were looking for a house in our neighborhood. What's going to happen to our room? Toby asked the evening after they left. What do you mean, kid? If new people come, where will you and I live? His eyes were serious and worried. I sat down next to him on the couch and put my arm around his shoulders. We'll find a new home, Toby. Better than this one. With a room just for you, maybe closer to your doctor in the park. He considered this, his face wrinkling in concentration. And Mom and Dad, are they going to live with us? No, I answered honestly. Your parents, they'll have to find their own place. He nodded, and I couldn't tell if it was relief or disappointment. Are they really tired of me? He asked suddenly, returning to Abigail's words, which had obviously hurt him deeply. My heart clenched. How do you explain to a 4-year-old the selfishness and callousness of your own parents? Toby, adults sometimes say stupid things when they're in a hurry or upset, I began gently. Your mom shouldn't have said that. It was a mistake. But is it true, he insisted? Are they tired of me because of my legs? I took his small face in the palms of my hands, looking straight into his eyes. Listen to me, Toby Hamtree. There is nothing, absolutely nothing that is wrong with you. Your legs don't work the way other kids' legs do, but that doesn't make you lesser or worse. Do you understand? He nodded, but I could see that doubt still plagued him. I'm not tired of you, I continued. I never will. I love you just the way you are. His arms wrapped around my neck, and he hugged me tightly, a moment of pure, unconditional love that was our salvation these days. By the end of the first week of Noah and Abigail's absence, Lydia had found a buyer willing to pay the asking price in cash. It was an East Coast family that was moving to Clear Lake because of her father's job. They want to close the deal as soon as possible, Lydia said over the phone. They could put down a deposit tomorrow and be paid in full in a week. Is that okay with you? More than okay, I answered. When do they need to move in? They're in a hurry, so they'd like to move in as soon as the deal closes. Will you have enough time to find a new place? Yes, I'm already looking into it. In fact, I've already found a suitable one. A small, one-story house in a quiet neighborhood, closer to the medical center where Toby was in therapy. The house was fully adapted for people with disabilities. The previous owner had used a wheelchair. Wide doorways, no thresholds, and an adapted bathroom made it perfect for Toby. While the paperwork was being processed, Toby and I continued our daily adventures. I noticed how, day by day, he became more confident, his smile more frequent, and his interest in the world brighter. Without Abigail's constant pressure and criticism, without Noah's detachment, Toby was blossoming. We received occasional texts from Noah, short texts with pictures of beaches and cocktails. Everything's great, weather's super, met dolphins on the cruise. Not a single question about how Toby is doing, how we're doing. Abigail didn't write at all. In the middle of the second week, we signed all the paperwork to sell the house. The money was transferred into my account, and Toby and I started packing. What should we take with us, he asked, helping me sort through the toys. Anything you want, baby. This is our fresh start. The day before our move, almost 2 weeks after Noah and Abigail left, I started packing their things too, neatly putting clothes in boxes, gathering personal items. I wasn't throwing anything away, not even hiding it, just preparing everything for when they would return and discover that their home was no longer theirs. That evening, after Toby fell asleep, I sat on the veranda with a glass of whiskey. A rare indulgence for me. I looked up at the starry sky, pondering my decision and what lay ahead. Part of me felt sad. After all, this was home, where Rosemary and I had lived all our lives, where Noah had been raised, where our memories were kept. But the other part, the stronger part, felt only determination. Noah and Abigail, through their actions, had destroyed what made this house a home. Their callousness towards their own son, their disregard for my feelings, all of it outweighed the nostalgia. I thought of our new house, bright, comfortable, no stairs, with a garden where Toby could play without fear of falling. Of the new life we would start, me and my grandson, two souls who found comfort and support in each other. And I also thought about what would happen when Noah and Abigail returned and found their house sold and their belongings packed away. About the anger, the shock, the accusations that would follow. About how they will demand an explanation, not realizing that the explanation is simple. Every choice has consequences. And their choice to put their own desires above the well-being of their own child has led to this moment. But that was only the beginning of my plan. Selling the house was the first step. The second, and more important, was to provide Toby with a future where he would be protected from the fickleness and selfishness of his parents. And in order to do that, I needed to take another major step, to begin the process of filing for custody of my grandson. On February 23rd, Toby and I woke up in a house that no longer belonged to us. At 10 o'clock in the morning, the moving van arrived, three sturdy men who carefully packed and carried our belongings out. I insisted that the boxes of Noah and Abigail's personal belongings be left in the garage, safely protected from moisture and dust. "Grandpa, why aren't those boxes coming with us?" Toby asked, watching the process from his chair in the corner of the living room. I sat down next to him, trying to find simpler words. "They're your parents' things. When they get back, they'll decide what to do with them." Toby frowned, digesting the information. "But where will they live?" "Their room is gone." "They have money to rent an apartment or buy another house," I said, trying to sound carefree. "They're adults. They'll manage." Toby nodded, though I could see that he didn't fully understand the situation. It's hard for a 4-year-old to grasp the concept of selling a house, especially when their parents are absent and not involved in the process. Around noon, all of our belongings were loaded, and it was time to say goodbye to the house where I had lived most of my life. I led Toby through the rooms, letting him say goodbye in his own way. In his nursery, now empty except for the built-in cabinets, he took a long look at the walls where his drawings had once hung. "We'll make your new room even better," I promised, squeezing his small hand. My own bedroom looked strangely bare, without Rosemary's pictures on the bedside table, or the old quilt she'd sewn when she was young. All of these treasures were already packed and waiting in the van. Last we toured the kitchen, the heart of the house, where Rosemary once baked her famous blueberry pies, where little Noah did his homework at the table, where Toby and I ate breakfast together every morning. "Ready?" I asked, and Toby nodded, his eyes serious but dry. I picked him up in my arms for the last time in this house and carried him out onto the porch. Our old sedan, loaded with essentials, was parked by the driveway, and the cargo van was waiting outside ready to follow us. Before I left, I handed the keys to the house to the new owners, a friendly couple with twin daughters who were excitedly checking out the garden. "I hope you'll be happy here," I said, shaking hands with the new owner. "Thank you, Mr. Hamtree. We appreciate you agreeing to such a quick deal." I nodded and, without looking back, walked to the car, where Toby was already waiting. Looking at him through the rearview mirror, I saw him waving goodbye to his childhood home. "Goodbye, home," he whispered. I started the engine, and we hit the road to a new beginning. Our new house was 15 minutes away from the old one, in a quiet neighborhood with wide sidewalks and low curbs. Perfect for Toby when he became more independent. One story with a spacious porch and a gentle ramp instead of steps, the house looked welcoming at first sight. "Look, Toby," I said, stopping in front of the house. "See the swing in the garden? And there's a little pond with fish in it." Toby's eyes widened with surprise and joy. "Real fish? Can I feed them?" "Sure," I smiled. "As soon as we unpack, I'll show you how to do it." The movers had already started unloading our boxes, and I helped Toby out of the car, supporting him as he walked slowly to the front door. I had specifically chosen this house not only because of its adaptability for a person with a disability, but also because it was much closer to the medical center where Toby was in therapy. Inside, the house was bright and spacious, with wide doorways with no thresholds and hardwood floors, no carpets to trip over. The bathroom was already equipped with handrails and a low sink, and the kitchen had countertops of different heights, which was convenient for both adult and child. "This is your room," I said, opening the door to a small but cozy bedroom with windows overlooking the garden. "We can paint the walls any color you choose." Toby looked around with curiosity, which gradually changed to delight. He walked to the window, balancing with difficulty without his cane, which I had not yet managed to get out of the car. "I can see the pond from here, and the swings, and there's a tree house there." "It's a gazebo," I explained, "but we can turn it into a cabin if you want." The next few hours were spent unpacking the essentials: bedding, kitchen utensils, clothes. The movers helped arrange the furniture according to my instructions, paying special attention to safety and comfort for Toby. By evening, with the truck gone and most of the boxes disassembled, Toby and I were settled into our new kitchen. I made a simple dinner, spaghetti and cheese, which Toby loved, and a salad for myself. We ate at the new table, which was the perfect height for Toby, and discussed plans for the future. "Tomorrow I'll help you decorate your room," I said, "and we'll go to the store to buy fish food and maybe some new toys for you." Toby smiled, but then his face turned serious again. "And when Mommy and Daddy come back from their trip, will they live here with us?" I set my fork aside, thinking carefully about my answer. "No, Toby. This house is just for you and me. When your parents come back, they'll have to find another place to live." He nodded, processing the information. "Will they be angry?" I didn't want to lie to him. "Maybe at first, but then they'll understand." "Realize what?" "That every decision has consequences," I said softly, "and that sometimes you have to make hard decisions to protect the ones you love." Toby seemed satisfied with that answer, and we finished dinner, discussing what color the walls in his room would be. That night, after putting Toby to bed in his new bed, I sat in the living room, slowly sipping my tea and thinking about our situation. My phone was silent. No calls or messages from Noah or Abigail. I checked my email on my tablet and saw one new message from Noah, sent a few hours ago. "Hey, Dad. We're in Nassau Harbor. The weather is great. Abigail bought a bunch of souvenirs. How are you guys doing?" No specific question about Toby, no interest in his condition or our daily lives. Just a polite question to which an equally polite answer was expected. I stared at the screen for a while, mulling over my answer. Finally, I wrote, "We are doing well. Toby misses you. Be sure to bring him the promised pirate hat." I didn't mention selling the house or moving. That's the news they had to find out when they got home. Not until after they had seen for themselves the consequences of their decision to abandon their son for 3 weeks. The next few days passed in the pleasant routine of setting up the new house. We painted the walls in Toby's room, his favorite blue color, hung shelves for books and toys, and arranged the furniture so that he could move around comfortably. I installed special handrails in strategic places to help Toby keep his balance, and replaced the regular chair at his desk with a more ergonomic one. We spent a lot of time in the garden, feeding the fish in the pond, swinging on the swings. I adapted one especially for Toby, with extra support, planting the first spring flowers. Toby loved fiddling in the soil, and I noticed that working with plants helped him develop his fine motor skills better than many of the exercises the therapist suggested. We established a new routine: breakfast, exercise, educational games, walks, rest, new physiotherapy sessions at a nearby clinic where we were met with understanding and professionalism. Toby was gradually getting used to his new place, and to my delight, seemed to be becoming more confident and happy. Occasional messages came from Noah and Abigail, pictures of tropical beaches, cocktails, tourist attractions. Sometimes short questions: "How are you there? Is everything okay?" But in none of their messages was there any real interest in their son's daily life or specific questions about his well-being. It was as if by sending him out of their lives for 3 weeks, they had also sent him out of their thoughts. In the second week after the move, I decided to take the next step in my plan. I contacted a lawyer specializing in family law and set up an appointment to discuss the possibility of filing for custody of Toby. "Mr. Hamtree," said the lawyer, an elegant middle-aged woman named Olivia Pierce, "in order to file for custody, we would need substantial evidence that the parents are incapable of properly caring for the child. Do you have that evidence?" I told her everything about Noah and Abigail's indifference to Toby's needs, about their decision to leave their disabled child for 3 weeks for fun, about Abigail saying, "We're tired of him," and how they weren't even interested in his well-being during their absence. "I understand your concern," Olivia said, taking notes, "but the courts are reluctant to strip parents of their rights. We need more than just your word for it. Are there medical records showing neglect? Maybe missed doctor's appointments or non-compliance with prescribed treatment?" I thought about it, remembering all the times Noah had refused to take Toby to the doctor, when Abigail had forgotten to give him the medication he needed or missed physical therapy sessions because she was busy. Yes, there have been such instances, I replied, and I can get confirmation from his doctors and therapists. Good. We'll also need testimony from neighbors, teachers, other relatives who can corroborate what you say about the neglect. And of course, we'll need to present evidence that you are capable of providing a stable and nurturing environment for Toby. We discussed the details of the process, possible scenarios, and timelines. It was going to be an uphill battle, especially since I had already sold the house and moved in with Toby without his parents' consent. But Olivia assured me that with the right approach and enough evidence, we had a chance. We'll start gathering the paperwork now, she said, but we'll apply when his parents get back. It would be better if they could confirm your position by their own actions. I agreed to this strategy and felt more confident as I left her office. I had a plan, and I followed it step by step. On Wednesday of the third week of Noah and Abigail's absence, when Toby and I returned from another physical therapy session, I found 3 missed calls from Noah and 1 voicemail message on my phone. I plugged the phone into the speakers in the car so I could listen to it as we drove home. Dad, it's Noah. Abigail and I decided to get back early. Sailed into Miami last night. We're taking plane tickets home today. Should be in Clear Lake tomorrow morning. I've been trying to call you. Listen, our neighbor Pearl called me and she said some bullshit about seeing furniture being taken out of our house and another family living there now. What kind of nonsense is that? Call me back, please. I turned off the tape and glanced in the rearview mirror at Toby. He was staring out the window, obviously oblivious to the message. Grandpa, look, there's a dog like the Wilsons, he exclaimed, pointing to a golden retriever walking with his owner on the sidewalk. Yeah, just like that, I replied, feeling my heart start to beat faster. So the news of the house sale had finally reached Noah and Abigail, and they were coming back not in a week, as they'd planned, but tomorrow. That meant that the second act of our drama would begin much sooner than I'd expected. At home, I sat Toby down in front of the TV with his favorite cartoon and retreated to the kitchen to call Noah back. I would have preferred them to learn the truth by seeing the empty house with their own eyes, but now that they were on their way, I needed to set the stage. Noah answered after the first beep. Dad, finally. What's Pearl been saying? She claims you sold the house. It's some kind of misunderstanding, isn't it? His voice sounded both irritated and uncertain, as if he suspected Pearl was telling the truth, but refused to believe it. No, Noah, I answered calmly. It's not a misunderstanding. I really did sell the house. Toby and I have moved out. There was a long pause. Then I heard Noah cover the microphone with his hand and say something quickly to someone, probably Abigail. When he spoke again, his voice shook with barely contained anger. You did what? You can't just... It's our house. We live there. Where's our stuff now? Where are we going to live when we get back? The house was in my name, Noah, I reminded him, and I had every right to dispose of it as I saw fit. As for your things, they're packed and waiting for you in the garage. The new owners have agreed to keep them for you. The new owners? His voice broke into a scream. Are you out of your mind? Why did you do that? And where did you and Toby move to? To a house better suited to his needs, I answered. And I did it, Noah, because I think it's best for Toby. Better for Toby? He was definitely yelling now. You stole our son and sold our house, and you think that's best for him? I heard Abigail's muffled scolding in the receiver and the sound of struggling for the phone. Oliver? It was Abigail's voice, cold and controlled despite the situation. Listen to me carefully. What you have done is child abduction and possibly fraud. We will call the police as soon as we land, and we're going to sue you. Do you understand that? I do, Abigail, I said calmly. But I'm afraid you'll have to prove that I acted illegally. The house was my property, and I had the right to sell it. Toby is in my custody with your full consent. You both left him to me for 3 weeks without providing any means for his maintenance and without taking any interest in his welfare during that time. We have, she objected. We wrote and asked how you were doing. General polite phrases, Abigail, not one specific question about his health, about his emotional state, about his progress in therapy. You were both too busy with your cocktails and beaches. I heard her inhale sharply. Where are you? Tell me the address. We'll be there as soon as we get back. We'll talk when you get back, I said. But not here. Meet me at Martha's Cafe downtown. Tomorrow at noon. We'll discuss the next steps there. You can't just, I interrupted her. I can, Abigail, and I already have. See you tomorrow. I hung up, ignoring the immediate follow-up call. My heart was beating fast, but not from fear or doubt, rather from determination and a strange sense of relief. The first part of my plan was done. The house was sold. Toby and I were settled in a new, more suitable place. And now the second part began, fighting for Toby's right to a stable, loving environment. Noah and Abigail were returning to the home that was no longer their home, to the son they had so easily left behind. And they were going to have to face the consequences of that decision. I walked back into the living room where Toby was still watching cartoons, his face calm and centered. He was unaware of the conversation that had just taken place, of the storm that was coming, and I intended to protect him from the worst of that storm. Would you like a cookie, buddy? I asked, taking a seat next to him. He nodded, smiling at me with a trust I swore I'd never betray. I arrived at Martha's Cafe 20 minutes before the appointed time. Toby had stayed home with Pearl. Not the old neighbor, but the new Pearl, an elderly retired nurse who lived 2 houses down from us. She has agreed to look after the boy while I take care of family matters. Toby seemed to take a liking to her from the first moment he met her, perhaps because of her soft voice or the collection of old children's books she'd brought with her. The cafe was half empty, a weekday afternoon lull. I chose a table in the corner, away from the other patrons, anticipating that the conversation might be loud. Martha, the hostess and an old acquaintance, brought me a cup of black coffee without sugar. She remembered my preferences from when I'd stop by on my way to work every morning. Is everything okay, Oliver? She asked, noticing my tension. You look worried. I'll know soon enough, I replied with a fake smile. I'm looking forward to a difficult conversation. She nodded understandingly and walked away, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I pulled a folder of documents out of my jacket pocket, a copy of the purchase agreement, a bank statement confirming the transfer of funds, and, most importantly, the preliminary custody papers Olivia Pierce and I had prepared last night as a matter of urgency. At precisely noon, the door of the cafe swung open with such force that the bell above it nearly flew off its mount. Noah flew inside, followed closely by Abigail. They both looked as if they'd rushed in after the bell had rung, their clothes wrinkled, their hair disheveled, their faces a mixture of rage, panic, and sleep deprivation. Their eyes darted around the room, instantly recognizing me. Without a word, they headed toward my table with wide strides. Abigail looked particularly impressive tanned, in an expensive summer dress that didn't match the February Clear Lake weather, with a look on her face that would freeze boiling water. Where's Toby? Was the first thing Noah asked, hovering over the table. His voice was tense as a string. At home with the babysitter, I answered calmly. Sit down, please. We need to talk. Talk? Abigail practically spit the word out. After you sold our house out from under us? After you kidnapped our son? Several diners in the cafe turned their heads in our direction. Martha behind the counter straightened warily, ready to intervene if necessary. I'd prefer to discuss this in a civilized manner, I said, pointing to the chairs opposite. And please, let's stick to the facts. I didn't sell your house. I sold my own house, which was registered in my name. And I didn't kidnap Toby. You yourself left him with me for 3 weeks. Noah collapsed into a chair, his face contorted with impotent rage. Abigail remained standing with her arms crossed over her chest. Sundersorn. We were just at the house, Noah said, his voice shaking. Another family lives there. They said they bought it from you. All our stuff is in boxes in the garage. How could you, Dad? How could I interjected, raising an eyebrow. How could you leave your 4-year-old son with a disability for 3 weeks to go on a cruise? How could you say, we're already tired of him in a way he could hear? Abigail went pale under her Caribbean tan. I never, she began, but I interrupted her. You said it, Abigail, the morning you were leaving. Toby was crying, didn't want to let you go, and you said to Noah, we're sick of him already. Bye. And those words broke your son's heart. Noah glanced at his wife, something akin to reproach flashing in his eyes. I don't remember her saying that. Because you were already in the cab, hurrying to get away, I said stiffly, but Toby heard, and he remembered. He asked me later if it was true that you were tired of him because of his legs. Abigail finally sat up, her self-confidence visibly shaken. I was annoyed. We were late, she said quietly. I didn't mean… You didn't? I leaned forward. In the 2 weeks you'd been gone, you'd never once asked specifically about Toby. Not once did you ask about his separation, his health, his therapy. Your texts have been about beaches, cocktails, and souvenirs. This didn't seem like the behavior of a parent missing their child. Noah ran his hand over his face, suddenly looking very tired. We deserve this vacation, Dad. You have no idea how hard it is to take care of a special needs child all the time. I don't. I could feel the anger rising inside of me. Who do you think's been taking care of Toby for the last 2 years? Who's been driving him to therapy while you've been working late? Who helped him with his exercises while Abigail was busy with her social media? Who read him stories before bed every night? Noah lowered his eyes, unable to find an answer. Abigail stared out the window, her profile stiff and unapproachable. That doesn't give you the right to take him away from us, she finally said, turning to me. He's our son. A son you barely cared for, I replied. A son you left for 3 weeks without a single thought for his emotional needs. A son whose medical appointments you regularly skipped because it was inconvenient. I opened the folder and pulled out the first document. Here's the purchase agreement for the house, a completely legitimate transaction. The money's already in my account. Noah took the paper with trembling hands, his eyes running over the lines as if looking for some loophole. You can't. We live there. It's our home. A house you didn't pay a dime for, I reminded him. You were my dependent for 4 years, Noah. 4 years instead of a year tops like you promised. And in all that time, you've made no move to find your own place, or at least pay rent. Abigail suddenly slapped her palm on the table, making the cups bounce. Enough. We're not going to sit here and listen to accusations. We want to take our son now. I calmly pulled a second document from the folder and placed it in front of them. I'm afraid it won't be that easy, I said. I initiated the custody proceedings for Toby. There was dead silence. Noah and Abigail stared at the document like it was a snake ready to bite. You… what? Noah whispered. I filed for custody of Toby, I repeated, on grounds of parental neglect on your part. Abigail grabbed the document, her eyes widening with shock before turning to rage. This is absurd, she exclaimed. No court would give custody to a grandparent over a parent. Normally not, I agreed. But in this case, there is ample evidence of neglect, medical records of missed appointments, testimony from therapists that you ignored their recommendations. The fact that you left a disabled child for 3 weeks with no financial support and little or no moral interest in their welfare. I paused, letting them realize the situation. And of course, testimonies from neighbors about how you treated Toby in your daily life. You'd be surprised how much people notice. Noah's face darkened. He clenched his fists on the table. You can't take our son away from us. He's ours. Do you understand? He's ours. A child is not a thing, Noah, I said quietly. He doesn't belong to anyone. He's a human being who needs care and love and stability. And if you can't or won't provide that, someone has to. Abigail suddenly laughed, a cold, unpleasant laugh. So that's what this is all about. You want to take our son because you have no one else. Because Grandma died and you're all alone. And now you want to steal our child to fill the void in your worthless life. I looked at her, feeling not anger but deep sadness. Did she really understand so little? I want Toby to be happy and healthy, I said calmly. And I've seen him blossom these past 2 weeks without your constant resentment and rejection. He's become more confident, more open. His speech has improved, his movements more coordinated. And it's all because he finally feels accepted and loved for who he is. Toby's custody hearing began exactly 2 months after Noah and Abigail returned from their cruise. All those weeks were filled with tense waiting, paperwork gathering, and rare, awkward, parental visits with their son. I'd seen Noah try to bond with Toby, bringing him gifts, offering him outings, even once coming in for a physical therapy session. But years of lack of genuine interest in his son had created a chasm that couldn't be bridged with toys and occasional visits. Toby was polite to his father but reserved, as if he expected Noah to lose interest in him again at any moment. Abigail, on the other hand, barely showed up. Twice she canceled meetings at the last minute, citing urgent matters. And when she did show up, she seemed tense and awkward, not knowing what to talk to her son about. Obviously, years of communicating through force, out of a sense of duty rather than love, had left them strangers to each other. On the day of the trial, I wore my only suit, bought years ago for the official events of the company where I worked. It hung looser on me than before age, and the stress of the last few months had taken their toll on my figure. Toby stayed with Pearl, who had become our trusted friend and helper. I didn't want to subject the boy to the stress of a court hearing where his parents and I would openly clash. The courthouse greeted me with the cold grandeur of marble and wood. In the hallway, I saw Noah and Abigail sitting on a bench next to a tall man in an expensive suit, their attorney. Abigail looked flawless as always, in a strict blue dress and immaculate hair. Noah looked exhausted, his eyes red from sleep or tears. They noticed me at the same time. Abigail turned away, staring defiantly in the opposite direction. Noah met my gaze for a moment, and I thought something like shame or regret flashed in his eyes before he looked away too. My attorney, Olivia Pierce, was waiting for me at the door of the conference room. She shook my hand with her dry, strong palm and nodded with a confident smile. "Everything is ready, Mr. Hamtree. We have a strong case and enough evidence. Just tell the truth and answer the questions directly and honestly." I nodded, feeling my heart pounding somewhere in my throat. Even though I was sure I was right, I couldn't shake the thought of confronting my own son in court. Something about it seemed profoundly wrong, disturbing the natural order of things. But then I remembered Toby's face, his words, "I want to stay with my grandfather," and my resolve returned. The trial began at 10 o'clock sharp. Judge Hawkins, a middle-aged woman with shrewd eyes and graying hair pulled back in a tight bun, scrutinized the case file before she began the hearing. "So," she said, looking around the room, "we have before us a custody case involving a minor, Toby Hamtree. The petitioner, Oliver Hamtree, the child's grandfather, seeks full custody on the grounds of parental neglect on the part of the parents. Defendants Noah and Abigail Hamtree, the child's parents, dispute this claim and insist on retaining parental rights." She looked over her glasses first at me, then at Noah and Abigail. "I should note that cases involving the termination of parental custody in favor of other relatives are taken extremely seriously. We operate on the presumption that the child is better off with the parents unless there is strong evidence to the contrary." Noah and Abigail's attorney, who introduced himself as Gregory Morris, straightened with a cocky smile. Olivia beside me remained unfazed. Olivia spoke first, presenting our case. She methodically laid out the facts: my care for Toby over the past few years, Noah and Abigail's regular absences from their son's medical appointments, their 3-week absence during the cruise without providing for the child, and with little or no interest in his well-being. "Your Honor," she said, "my client is not seeking to destroy the family. He is acting solely in the best interests of the child. Toby Hamtree is a special needs boy who needs constant care, therapy, and above all, emotional support. The evidence will show that his parents did not provide him with this sufficiently." Morris, in his opening statement, introduced Noah and Abigail as tired but loving parents who simply took a well-deserved vacation and entrusted the child to his grandfather. "Your Honor," he said smoothly, "parents are entitled to private time. Mr. and Mrs. Hamtree left their son with a close relative, trusting him entirely to his care. They could not have foreseen that this would be used to try to terminate their parental rights. This is manipulation and emotional blackmail by an elderly man who, having lost his wife, is now trying to create a new family for himself at the expense of alienating a child from his parents." I felt the blood rush to my face from his words, but Olivia gently placed her hand on my wrist, urging me to remain calm. Then the witness calls began. First, Olivia called Dr. Raymond, Toby's physical therapist. Dr. Raymond, how often had Toby's parents attended his therapy sessions over the past year? Dr. Raymond, a lean man with attentive eyes, checked the records. 52 sessions had been scheduled in the last year. Mr. Oliver Hamtree had attended 50 of them. The boy's father, Mr. Noah Hamtree, had been to 8 seances. Mrs. Abigail Hamtree was at 2. And who usually did the home exercises you prescribed with Toby? As far as I can tell from Toby's progress, in his own words, it was his grandfather, Mr. Oliver Hamtree. Over the last 2 months since they moved into their new home, Toby's progress has accelerated considerably. It is evident that the exercises are being done regularly and correctly. Morris, on cross-examination, tried to insinuate that the parents delegated these duties to Grandpa because they trusted him, but Dr. Raymond was relentless. The therapy of a child with cerebral palsy requires the whole family. It is not something that can be simply delegated. A child psychologist was then called in to assess Toby's emotional state. The child shows signs of emotional detachment from his parents, and especially his mother, she testified. At the same time, his relationship with his grandfather is characterized by deep affection and trust. When asked who he would like to live with, Toby clearly chose his grandfather. Children often prefer someone who spoils them and doesn't set boundaries, Morris objected on cross-examination. That's a simplistic view, the psychologist replied. Toby did not point to a lack of rules or overindulgence as a reason for his preference. On the contrary, he noted his grandfather's consistency and reliability, his patience, and his understanding of Toby's characteristics. These are signs of healthy, structured care, not pampering. Then it was the turn of neighbors who testified that they saw me walking Toby regularly, while his parents rarely appeared with him in public. Toby's school teacher testified that it was always me, not Noah or Abigail, who came to parent-teacher conferences. Finally, it was my turn to testify. I stepped up to the witness stand, feeling the weight of Noah and Abigail's stares. Morris attacked me with questions, trying to portray my actions as manipulation, revenge, a selfish attempt to keep my grandson. Mr. Hamtree, isn't it true that you used your position as a homeowner to essentially blackmail your son and his wife? By selling the house, you've left them homeless. I sold my house because I wanted to provide Toby with a more suitable environment, I replied calmly. The house we live in now is fully adapted to his needs. No stairs, wide doorways, a specially equipped bathroom. As for Noah and Abigail, I've rented an apartment for 3 months to give them time to find a permanent home. And you don't feel you overstepped your authority as a grandfather by doing so? I acted as Toby's guardian while his parents were on the cruise. They were gone for 3 weeks, left no funds to support him, and had little or no interest in his condition the entire time. Sure, they left him with you because they trusted you. They left him because, in Abigail's words, they were tired of him. And those were the words Toby heard. There was silence in the hall. I saw Abigail turn pale, and Noah lowered his head, covering his face with his hands. Then Noah and Abigail testified. Noah seemed genuinely remorseful, admitting that he hadn't been involved enough in his son's life. I loved him, but, yeah, I wasn't the father I should have been, he said quietly. I thought I could put that responsibility on my father's shoulders because it seemed natural to him and difficult for me. Abigail was more belligerent, insisting that she and Noah were normal parents who were unfairly judged by inflated standards. Yes, we took a vacation. Yes, we wanted a vacation. Is that a crime? She said indignantly. We left our son with his grandfather, not a stranger. We knew he was safe. Mrs. Hamtree, Olivia asked during cross-examination, is it true that in the 2 weeks you were away, you never once specifically inquired about your son's health, his emotional well-being, or his progress in therapy? Abigail faltered. We wrote and asked how they were doing. I beg to differ. Did you ask specific questions about Toby's health and well-being, or were they general phrases of politeness? Yeah, we were on a cruise. Communications were not always stable. After all the testimony, Judge Hawkins called a recess to review the materials and make a ruling. The hour of waiting in the courtroom corridor was interminable. I sat on the bench looking at my hands, the old bus driver's hands that now massaged Toby's feet daily, helped him dress, held him as he learned to balance. Noah and Abigail sat at the other end of the hallway, not speaking to each other. Finally, we were invited back into the hall. Judge Hawkins looked at us seriously over her glasses. In custody cases, she began, the overriding principle is always the good of the child. Not the rights of the parents, not the wishes of other relatives, but exactly what is best for the child. In this case, We're talking about a boy with special needs who needs constant care, therapy, and emotional support. She shifted her gaze to Noah and Abigail. I have carefully reviewed all of the evidence presented. Medical records show systematic absences from scheduled therapy sessions on the part of the parents. Testimony from neighbors, teachers, and medical professionals indicates that the primary caregiver for the child was his grandfather, Mr. Oliver Hamtree. I find it particularly compelling that the parents, knowing of their son's special needs, left him for 3 weeks with no financial support and little or no emotional support to go on a cruise. Judge Hawkins paused, looking at me now. Selling a house and moving with a child without parental consent is a problematic aspect of this case. However, given that the house was your personal property, Mr. Hamtree, and that the new home is obviously better suited to the needs of a child with cerebral palsy, the court finds no malice in these actions. She then straightened up and announced her decision. The court orders that primary custody of minor Toby Hamtree be awarded to his grandfather, Mr. Oliver Hamtree, based on proven parental neglect on the part of the parents. The parents, Noah and Abigail Hamtree, retain limited parental rights, including the right to regular visitation with the child on a set schedule. I felt my shoulders relax in relief. Next to me, Olivia Pierce smiled demurely. From across the room, I heard Noah sob and saw Abigail stand up abruptly and head for the exit without waiting for the meeting to end. Judge Hawkins continued. The court also orders Noah and Abigail Hamtree to pay child support and to regularly participate in his medical and therapeutic procedures. The situation will be reevaluated in 6 months, with the possibility of extending parental rights if their involvement in their son's life significantly improves. When the hearing was adjourned, I stood up feeling a strange mixture of triumph and sadness. I had won the right to take care of Toby, but at the cost of a permanent break with my son. Noah caught up with me in the hallway, his eyes red from holding back tears. "Dad," he said, his voice trembling, "are you happy? You got what you wanted." I looked at him, at my only son, and I felt not anger but exhaustion. "I didn't want this, Noah. I wanted you to be a good father to Toby. I still want that." He shook his head, his face contorted with bitterness. "You always knew best, didn't you? You were always perfect, and I was a disappointment." "That's not true," I said quietly. "You're my son, and I've loved you from the first day of your life. But this isn't about you and me. This is about Toby, a boy who deserves better than what you and Abigail have given him." Noah didn't answer, just turned and walked away, his shoulders slumped as if under an invisible weight. A year later, a lot had changed. Toby's house and I had become the center of his life. His room was decorated with his own drawings and models of the ships we had built together. In the garden, I installed special equipment for his exercises, as well as a slide and swings adapted to his abilities. Toby went to a new school, closer to home, with an integration program for children with special needs. There he found friends who accepted him for who he was. His physical condition improved dramatically with regular therapy and daily exercise. He still used a cane for support, but his movements became more confident and coordinated. Noah visited his son every Sunday, gradually learning to be a real father. He started coming to therapy sessions, taking an interest in Toby's school progress, bringing not only gifts but also his time and attention. We developed a polite but distant relationship. The wounds were too fresh for real reconciliation. Abigail, on the other hand, had virtually disappeared from Toby's life. After a few formal visits in the first few months after the trial, she started missing appointments, finding more and more excuses. Eventually, Noah informed me that they had broken up. Her ambitions and lifestyle did not involve caring for a child with a disability, even on limited terms. But Abigail's absence was made up for by the new people in Toby and I's lives. Pearl, our neighbor, became almost a member of the family, often dropping by with homemade baked goods and new books for Toby. Lydia, the realtor who helped me sell my old house and find a new one, would sometimes bring her son, Toby's age, to play together. Dr. Raymond recommended a support group for families with children with cerebral palsy, where we met other grandparents raising grandchildren. Toby found friends there, and I found support and understanding from people facing similar challenges. One Sunday morning, as Toby and I were having breakfast on the veranda, watching the fish in the pond, he suddenly asked, "Grandpa, are you happy?" I looked at him, His serious little face, the freckles scattered across his nose, the reddish hair that reminded me so much of Rosemary. Yes, baby, I answered honestly. I'm happy. And it was true, despite all the difficulties, despite the separation from my son, despite the weight of responsibility for a special needs child at my age, I was happy. Because I saw Toby blossom, I saw him learn to trust, to love, to dream. I saw the shadow of insecurity and fear of rejection disappear from his eyes. Me too, Toby said, turning back to his pancakes. I'm happy to have you. And in that moment, I knew that all the sacrifices, all the hard decisions, all the battles were not in vain, because Toby was happy, and that was all that mattered.